So Abu Zayd then was subjected to that, but as soon as the judgment was handed down, in fact, I was still in Cairo, I called him, I said, I want to meet you. I never could meet him because I told him I'll meet you when I come back from London. By that time, he had to leave the country because a very extremist Egyptian group called the Jama'ah Islamiyah, they said, because Abu Zayd, a court had decreed he's no longer a Muslim, his blood is now legitimate to be shed. And Abu Zayd then fled. The court didn't say that he should be killed, but these extreme groups, then interpreted that way, threatened him, and he then went into exile to Holland. Last summer, Nasser died, coming back from Indonesia, and died in Cairo because of a certain disease that he picked up. But he spent, since 1995 till 2010, he spent in the Netherlands. Now, that is only one example. I think the most recent example is the one that we found that Manzoor Cheema just identified as the question of what happened in Pakistan. But the Pakistan issue is possibly one of the most serious circumstances where this thing happens. And I would say it is not even of the gravity of some of the objections that the people might have had against Abu Zayd in Egypt. I mean, I don't think Abu Zayd deserved the kind of treatment. I think there's disagreement, among scholarly disagreement, and according to the scholar that I've studied most, as Dr. Jackson knows, I studied Al-Ghazali. Al-Ghazali says that you must do your ultimate to make sure that when someone gives a certain kind of interpretation, you must look at what is the positive side of that interpretation. In other words, always give the benefit of the doubt in the interpretation to the interpreter. Don't go for the most negative or for the most injurious or criminalizing version of an interpretation. So if you can find mitigatory grounds for giving the interpreter the benefit of the doubt, then you should go in that direction. And furthermore, in the Abu Zayd case, Abu Zayd would argue, as with many other scholars, that these are not the biggest issues that one can, hold someone accountable for and say that this person is trying to subvert Islam's teachings. But in Pakistan, lots of people have been incarcerated, hundreds of people have been incarcerated, including Muslims, on charges of blasphemy. And many, many private acts of terrorism continue to be let loose by the law. In other words, as the law does not intervene, and so private acts of terrorism and also vendetta creates a situation that is really, really injurious and very dangerous to the lives of people. Let me give you a couple examples. In the late spring of 1994, a Muslim who had accidentally dropped a copy of the Quran into a fire was stoned and then doused with kerosene and burned to death by a mob after the clerics had shouted over loudspeakers from the minarets of a mosque that the Christian had burned the Quran. Another woman found herself charged with blasphemy when a personal copy of the Quran fell out of a shopping bag to the ground and people start saying she disrespected the Quran. So this has become a very, very dangerous tool in the hands of miscreants who would just accuse everybody because of personal vendettas and saying that that person had defiled the Quran and was disrespectful to the Quran. As the Pakistan Human Rights Commission has stated, that blasphemy law gives a killing edge to Muslim fanaticism and to certain Orthodox Muslims as contempt for local minorities, especially Christians. In December 1990, Tahir Iqbal, a convert from Islam to Christianity, was arrested because of his apostasy and held in prison in Lahore on the charge of blasphemy. After a year and a half of a waiting trial, Iqbal, a paraplegic, died under mysterious circumstances. 2 weeks before his death, Iqbal had written to members of the Pakistani government, including the Prime Minister, expressing fear of his life. He believed that there was a conspiracy to poison him. No police action was taken to investigate his death, despite petition to conduct a post-mortem. One of his Muslim neighbors said Tahir was an intelligent and good person. His only offense was his conversion to Christianity. This is an even more sad story, the next one. Ni'mat Ahmar, a Christian and teacher in the state school in the village of Dasuha, was shocked one day in December 1991 to find anonymous posters around the village accusing him of blaspheming the Prophet of God. A later investigation by the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan found no witnesses amongst his students, colleagues, or even Muslims in the village who had ever heard him make any such insult. Ni'mat Ahmad believed that a rival candidate for his teaching position, a Muslim, had put up the posters. Many local Muslims were nonetheless convinced that Ni'mat Ahmad had blasphemed, even though he denied it and offered unconditional apology for any offense and any presumed remarks attributed to him might have caused. Fearful, Ni'mat Ahmad consulted with the bishop of nearby Faisalabad, took leave from his post and took a job in Faisalabad. On January 6, 1992, Farooq Ahmad, who had seen the posters in Dasuha, the village where he's from, traveled to Faisalabad, found Ni'mat Ahmad in his place of work and stabbed him to death, inflicting 17 wounds. After the first strike, Ahmad asked Ni'mat Ahmad why he had blasphemed. Ahmad denied having blasphemed, but Ahmad continued the attack. At the police station, Ahmad was kissed by some of the policemen for his remarkable courage and commitments to Islam. Villagers came to give him cookies and flowers, and many clerics from the area visited him to offer their congratulations, while some engaged lawyers to defend him. In addition, the president of the local bar association, that is the Association of Lawyers, offered his services to Ahmad, while no prominent lawyer would accept representing the family of the murdered Ni'mat Ahmad. Beyond taking the names of witnesses, the police took no steps to develop the investigation. The Bishop of Faisalabad gauged that among the Christians, a sense of helplessness, insecurity, and anguish had crept in. Such cases have impelled a senior Christian school teacher to decline a promotion to headmaster because I knew, he says, any disgruntled teacher or student could send me to prison by accusing me of blasphemy. So I'm not going to take the principal's position. It's just putting myself into trouble. Another non-Muslim history teacher was asked in class which of the two periods of the Prophet Muhammad's life was the better, the years in Mecca or the years in Medina. Upon his answer, the teacher was charged with blasphemy. I think the most famous case, those of you who follow the news, know that an even worse incident was soon to follow. In May 1993, the Imam of a village called Ratta Dohtran lodged a complaint that sometime during the previous year, some persons had insulted the Prophet of God by graffiti on the bathroom wall and on pieces of paper cast into the mosque. The accused were two men, Rahmat Masih and Manzoor Masih, and an illiterate 11-year-old boy called Salamat Masih. From their names, if you know Urdu, they are Christians. Masih means Messiah. Allegations were that the group was retaliating for a sermon the Imam had given some time ago, stating that it was a sin to believe that Christ had died on the cross. As you know, Muslims do not believe that Christ had died on the cross, that he was raised up unto heaven, and that's a disagreement that Muslims have with Christians on the whole question of Christ, of course, including the sacrality of Christ in Christianity and Muslims believing that he's a prophet. The testimony against Salamat Masih was from an 8-year-old boy. This is an 11-year-old kid, Salamat Masih. The testimony against him was an 8-year-old boy with whom Salamat had been quarreling over ownership of some pigeons, who said he witnessed Salamat writing on the mosque walls his anti-Islam graffiti. The day after the quarrel between the two boys, a group of men arrived at Salamat's home, forcibly took him to the village mosque, and beat him until he confessed to acts of blasphemy. Muslim demonstrations and boycotts against the Christians in Salamat Masih's village brought a further charge of blasphemy against 8 other Christians. Ubiquitous signs proclaimed anyone who blasphemes against the Prophet should be hanged in public. Soon thereafter, all the Christian families who had been in the village for generations decided to leave. On the day of the hearing, a mob outside the courtroom demanded death for all 3 accused, with handbills and sermons to the same effect, were spread throughout the area. The bar, that is the legal profession, was intimidated. A lawyer who agreed to take the case failed to appear, and no other lawyers could be found and engage on behalf of the Masih brothers. 5 months later, in November 1993, the boy Salamat Masih was released, one of the very few Christians ever granted bail, but bail was set too high for the other two accused. Because of the threats to the defendants, the case was transferred to Lahore, and prospects for the release seemed good. On April 5, 1994, the counsel for the prosecution proposed a settlement, which was approved by the court. As the three defendants were being escorted out of the courthouse's back entrance, 3 gunmen on motorcycles appeared and opened fire. Manzoor Masih was killed with 12 bullets fired into his body. Rahmat Masih received multiple wounds in the stomach area, but none struck a vital organ. Salamat Masih was wounded in the wrist and hand. A social worker assisting the trio was seriously wounded. One of the assailants was identified as a local imam who had originally brought the charge of blasphemy against the group. Charged with murder, the imam is free on bail, assured by the prosecutor that he does not want to purge the charge. A huge mourning procession by Christians and non-Christians called for the repeal of blasphemy laws, but the government of Benazir Bhutto remains hesitant in the face of the increasingly militant fundamentalist opposition. The High Court judgment of this matter of the Masih brothers also alluded to the possibility that a personal vendetta motivated the charges. But worse than that, a division when this court case took place, so many people gathered in Lahore's main area in the mall and basically argued that these people should be executed. And one group offered about 300,000 rupees for someone to execute for killing Salamat and Rahmat. Worse than that happened that the judge, a man by the name of Judge Bhatti, Justice Arif Iqbal Bhatti, the senior member of the Lahore High Court bench that acquitted Salamat and Rahmat Masih, continued to receive death threats. On October 10, 1997, an individual posing as a client gained access to Justice Bhatti's chambers where the former judge practiced law subsequent to his retirement. So he was a retired judge now after he served on the bench. The individual opened fire at Mr. Bhatti, who was hit by 5 bullets, sustaining injuries to his face and stomach. The assailant reportedly left the office quite calm, and local police allegedly reached the scene more than 90 minutes after the occurrence. Mr. Bhatti's young brother, who had chambers close by, was immediately informed of the shooting and rushed to Mr. Bhatti's office. Mr. Bhatti was alive but critically injured. It is said that due to security arrangements pertaining to the visit from Queen Elizabeth to Pakistan, Mr. Bhatti was unable to reach hospital on time and died en route. Mr. Bhatti's family claimed that the murder was a result of the acquittal granted to Salamat and Rahmat Masih by the Lahore High Court Division Bench in 1995. A source in the police department quoted Justice Bhatti's family as accusing unidentified activists of a religious party for involvement in the murder, claiming that after the announcement of the verdict in the Masih case, Mr. Bhatti had been receiving threatening and abusive calls from some activists for a long time.